Now, you might be an ISFP listening, so we're going to talk about you and your personality type related to career, or you might know somebody or have an ISFP in your life. Maybe they work for you or work with you. This might be a very interesting insight into how ISFPs show up to the working world. And we're going to approach this through a very particular lens today, Antonia, the idea of expressions of the ISFP, 4 different expressions of the ISFP personality type.
Right. So one of the reasons why we're talking about this, just to add a little context, is that we've been doing this personality life path mentorship for a little while now, and we're noticing that people are showing up to this particular mentorship group, but in general, any of our mentorships, because they're in a time period of transition.
Yeah.
And right now, careers seem to be on people's minds. Like, what is the right career for me? A lot of people are in career changes, and it's just like a general time period of reflection. And so because of that, we've also noticed that when you go online to look for information around type and careers, there can be of course, the internet is doing its best to try to compile all the best, suggestions, but it can be a little limiting, actually. Sometimes based on stereotypes, sometimes based on just certain flavors of each of the types.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to unpack a little bit more about the different ways that each of the types can show up, in this case, ISFPs, and how that might impact their career and how their career might actually impact them.
Absolutely. So I did my internet research, by the way.
Yeah.
I went out to the internets and I came up with an anecdotal top 10 list for ISFPs and career choices. Now, this is just me doing some searching and, pulling together a top 10 list. This is not a definitive list, but this is basically what the internets tell me is the best career for ISFPs. Are you ready?
I don't think people know that when you say internets, you're being
Funny?
Ironic.
It's like it's an old Gen X term.
We're at a time period where we're old enough so that if we say things ironically, people don't take them ironically anymore.
I've noticed that people have a hard time with parody. They take it too serious now.
Somebody's going to say it's not internets, it's internet, and it's like, yeah, that's the joke.
Well, anyway, you want to hear the top 10 list
I do.
for ISFPs? Okay, so here's artist, fine artist, graphic designer in particular. Number 2, interior designer. 3, chef. 4, conservationist, environmental scientist. 5, musician. 6, fashion designer. 7, landscape architect, art therapist, athlete, and veterinarian.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Those are the top 10 that the internet, singular, not plural, told me are the career choices for ISFPs. Now, you might be an ISFP listening or know an ISFP that doesn't have one of those careers, and that's a very overgeneralized list, I would argue.
Yeah, and it also discounts that there are certain flavors of ISFPs that can do more traditional roles.
Yeah.
And because that's almost a romantic list, I would say.
Yeah, well, and I think today what we want to do is lay down some principles to make really good choices for you as an ISFP going through your career, rather than a topic or, the internet said I'm supposed to go for this, so I guess that's the career I'll choose. No, there's probably ways you lean into the energies you bring to the world that are tailored to you and how you want to approach your career life.
Oh, ISFPs love the phrase tailored to you.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So let's talk about the premise that we're working with in this conversation, or sort of the foundational model, which is borrowed from our friend Dr. Dario Nardi, who did a series of EEG machine scan-led research around how the same personality type can manifest in multiple subtypes. Now, Dario was reluctant to call these subtypes because he wanted to give people the idea that actually this is flexible.
Yeah.
If you look at things in terms of nature and nurture, nature is our pre-wiring. It's what we come with. And it looks like our personality type, our Myers-Briggs personality type is more nature. It's a pre-wired, sort of a way that we are pre-wired to experience the world and the things that we tend to be focused upon. But our subtype, or our flavor, is more nurture. It's more how we are treated and responded to, and the things we're rewarded for in our development and when we're growing up, and even after the age of 25, and this is why it's particularly relevant, our career choice, the thing we're spending a lot of our time doing, will also have an impact on how we show up.
This is expression of type. This is the way we express our personality type. This isn't necessarily the cognitive functions of our mind.
Right,
we're
exactly.
talking about here.
Right, although that does come in. So we'll talk a little bit about how that gets woven in. So depending upon your flavor of the ISFP type, you're going to be attracted to different styles of careers. And in fact, the career you chose might be influencing that very subtype. It might be influencing how you're showing up. So there's a relationship between yourself and where you're spending a chunk of change, all your time doing, problem solving and focus and, effectively interacting with this thing that your livelihood is based upon. That gives it a sense of weight. And that means it's going to influence your type as well. So there's like a back and forth relationship between our type and our career. And so your career choice is important to understand how it's influencing you, but it also is important to understand what kind of subtype, careers are best suited for you. Mm-hmm. And if you're in the quote unquote wrong career or a career that maybe is adjacent, other ISFPs would love it, but for you, it's not exactly right.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's not just that you're a unique individual as a person. That's part of it too. But it also could be that you're wired just a little differently from other ISFPs, enough so that it will influence what you're attracted to and the kind of career that's right for you.
So if you want to get a little bit more on where we get this material from, we did a podcast with Dr. Dario Nardi just a few episodes ago, a couple months ago, so you can look that up. And we talk about these subtypes in detail. We go through what it looks like. We like all the math behind what we're going to talk about today. We unpack in that episode. We don't have time for that today. But just know there are 4 subtypes. We detail it out. It's tied to the brain scan work that Dario's done with individuals. So he knew what best fit type they were, and then he watched the brain patterns, and so he organized it that way. It also ties into Dr. Helen Fisher's work with certain neurochemical receptors in the brain.
Yeah, neurotransmitters,
like testosterone, serotonin, dopamine, estrogen. Those are the 4 main ones that she works with. And so we're presenting this on a platter for you to digest today, but there's a bunch of math behind this that you can go and research on your own.
Right. And we'll leave a link somewhere around this podcast so that you can go check out Dario's work on these different subtypes. So the 4 different subtypes of ISFPs are the dominant, the creative, the normalizing, and the harmonizing. And these are related to how they're, what's technically called the cognitive functions, how they prefer to engage and interact with the world. Now, if you're brand new to type, if you just are trying to wrap your head around the idea of being an ISFP at all, then we'll make sure that there's 2 layers going here. We'll make sure that it's accessible to you as somebody who's, just looking for general career advice as an ISFP. And I think that you'll be able to spot yourself in some of these descriptions to be able, to self-determine, right? Or listen for which subtype resonates with you the most. And also we'll throw a little bit of the more technical piece in there if you are a type geek. So for the type geeks out there, your subtype is determined by how your cognitive functions, particularly your first 2 functions, your dominant and auxiliary, or what we call the driver and co-pilot in the car model, whether or not they have a preference for being assertive and sort of pushing the will of those functions out to the world, or whether or not they have a preference for being receptive and taking in more information more and sort of determining it, being more influenced by the world. So one way that you could see this is that the first style is what's technically called the analytic version, and that's more laser targeted, more focused. And the second style is called holistic, and that's more of an open frame. It's like you're taking in more territory, but because you're taking in a broader peripheral, you're not as focused. You're not as asserting your energy out. You're more taking in a wider frame.